The intensity of the Russian air support early on, the Russians were flying sortie after sortie after sortie after sortie in an effort to reverse this. It's not that the Russians said, "Oh, the hell with it, let's surrender, let's give up on Syria." The Russians were putting everything they had with their limited resources to try and resolve this situation. Iran was sent in generals and was going to send in troops and send in, a popular militia out of Iraq. They mobilized and they headed to the border. When they got there, they went, but the Syrian, you can't ask people to fight for Syria when the Syrian army isn't going to fight for Syria. And what happened in the end is that the Syrian army just gave up and went away. Nobody fought for Syria, not even the Syrian people. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened in, Syrian cities where the people say, well, if the army's not going to be here, we're going to form self-defense groups. We're going to defend ourselves. They didn't do that. There was no defense, literally no defense of the Assad regime in the end. Total collapse. So HTS went all the way. To me, the proof positive that none of this was planned is that Jolani was in charge in Damascus. In what world does an Al-Qaeda head chopper who killed Americans, helped create ISIS, suddenly in charge in Damascus? The Turks, everybody says the Turks did this. The Turks have a government in exile sitting in Turkey, a bunch of fat Syrians who can put on ties in their overstuffed little shirts and be put on a bus and bust into Damascus to become the government. If this was planned by the Turks, this is what would have happened. But it didn't happen. Those fat, overstuffed Syrian government in exile people are still in their hotels in Turkey because they were taken by surprise. That's what happened. Nobody predicted this. And so as it collapses, Russia basically put out the word that Russia's not going to interfere, but Russia will defend Russian. And look what happened. All the Russian outposts, none were attacked. And now Russia is withdrawing them back to Latakia and there. And then Russia has to figure out what's going to happen. Remember, the Russians are only there on the authority of the invitation of a government that no longer exists. Russia doesn't get to assert rights. Russia will have to enter into a discussion with whatever government emerges to determine the fate. And if that new government says that the Russian forces must leave, then the Russian forces must leave. Russia's not going to reinforce, invade, occupy. That's what people who wear the stars and stripes do. Russia isn't that country. I know there's a lot of people frustrated by this, a lot of people angered by this, but this is the reality. This is the reality. Russia is a law-abiding nation. And when you take a look at, I love these questions, Scott, am I psyops too? I don't know. Are you a geopolitical analyst too? Let's see your take on this. I'd love to see what your predictions were. There's so many people out there right now that are angered by this and frustrated by this and aren't happy with the outcome. I'm not happy with the outcome. I think it's a horrible outcome. It's a horrible outcome for just about everybody involved. All the people dancing in the streets right now. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. I spit on them. I spit on them. Why? Because you're dancing on the grave of a nation and you're dancing on the future of entire generations. This will not end well for anybody except Israel, who's coming out as the big winner in this, the United States. But even the United States is going to pay a price for this. This is, again, I just ask people to reflect on the following. Where did Jolani come from? Baghdad, Iraq. He was part of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, AQI. He went from Iraq to Syria, where he helped al-Baghdadi create ISIS. And then he transformed into al-Nusra, went back to his Al-Qaeda roots, and now he's the head of HTS, which is rebranded Al-Qaeda. But he's a man who says, I believe in the greater caliphate. Okay, the greater caliphate doesn't, Damascus is just one part of the greater caliphate. If you don't think he has his eyes set on Iraq and restoring the caliphate to Iraq, you don't know who this man is and what he stands for. And I think this instability that's breaking out all over will end up rebounding on Iraq. Because remember, the government in Iraq is a Shia government. And the guys that just took over are head-chopping Sunni fanatics who believe that Baghdad is a Sunni city belonging to the greater caliphate. So I think you're going to see a whole bunch of things happening into Iraq. This is going to be bad for the United States. What's happening right now with our Kurdish allies? Turkey's attacking them. Turkey's a NATO ally. Are we going to go to war against Turkey to support Kurds? Kurds who now, when you see the collapse of the Assad government, understand there's a delicate balance between the Kurds and the Syrian government regarding the border security, etc. The Syrian government is finished, gone, done. That army that was securing the borders with Turkey, finished, gone. So Turks are going to let the Kurds control the border. Kurds who were part of, even though we call them the Syrian Democratic Forces, are really YPG, which is nothing more than the PKK. So we're going to give the PKK control of the Syrian-Turkish border, knowing that right over the border are real PKK waiting to do. So Turkey's going to do that. Where do we come in? Where does the United States with 900 troops in Syria come in on this? The United States didn't pre-plan this. Nobody pre-planned this. This was one of these accidents of history that happened, and we're now trying to figure out what the hell just happened. Turkey's the biggest loser now. Turkey's the biggest winner now. I don't understand how you could possibly say Turkey's losing. Turkey has always felt, again, all the people saying that, please read your history. In 1918, when Turkey talked about, at the end of World War I, talked about the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and that the Turkish Republic would become Greater Anatolia. You do know that the Vilayet of Aleppo was considered to be part of Greater Anatolia. You know that the Vilayet of Mosul was considered to be Greater Anatolia, and that it was French and British people in Europe that drew lines on a map that took Turkish territories from the mindset of the Turks away from them and gave them to these artificial states called Syria and Iraq. And the Turks have been resentful of that ever since. We can talk about Turkish, stabbing people in the backs, etc. They've never, ever hidden their desire for the return of Aleppo. So in many ways, the Turks have been the most honest people here, saying this is what we want and this is what we're going to get. And they got it. The Turkish flag is flying over Aleppo right now. I mean, how do you consider the Turks to be losers? Turkey betrayed Russia. That's my other favorite one out there. Turkey betrayed. How did Turkey betray Russia? The Astana Agreement was imposed on Turkey. Imposed on Turkey. Go back and look at the history of that. Turkey didn't ask for Astana. Turkey was dragged to Astana by Putin. Remember the Sochi meetings where Erdogan went to Putin and was begging forgiveness for shooting down a Russian airplane and was trying to figure out how to prevent that from turning into war? Guys, learn your history before you open your mouths or before you put fingers on the keyboard. Astana was imposed on Turkey. Anytime you have an imposed solution, understand that when the circumstances change, the party that had a solution imposed on it will seek a different outcome. And that's what Turkey is doing here. What did you expect Turkey to do about Idlib? It was always the unsolvable problem. Especially, and again, Russia didn't help. Remember when Russia solved the problem of al-Nusra outside of Damascus? The Russian military police came in and said, get on a bus. Where did they take them? Idlib. Where did they take the guys from Dara who didn't flee to Jordan? Idlib. They took all the al-Qaeda people up to Idlib. An Idlib that Turkey had populated with Turkmen, with Uyghurs, with Turkic people from around the world to create a Turkic province that it said, therefore, will become part of Turkey. So Turkey's doing this. The al-Qaeda head choppers come in, and now we have this cancer. How does that get resolved? Do you kill everybody in Idlib? Turkey can't absorb them. They're not going to they can't send them home. It's a problem. It's there. And that problem was created by Russia. Russia helped create that problem to solve another problem. To solve this problem, they created this problem. So Russia helped create an unsolvable problem. And so Turkey was told to solve it. So they did. And now everybody's mad at Turkey for solving it. I'm not sitting here singing the praises of Turkey, but I just refuse to jump on this Turkey betrayed everybody bandwagon. They did. This is a failure of Syria. We need to put the blame where the blame belongs. And the blame is Bashar al-Assad because he did not undertake the necessary reforms. But now, I would say history prevented him from undertaking the necessary reforms. Bashar al-Assad was a dentist. Was he groomed to be president of Iran, of Syria? Nope. You know who was? His older brother. Older brother is supposed to be the president of Syria. Bashar al-Assad was just supposed to be a dentist. That's all he wanted to be, an orthodontist. Then his older brother dies, his father dies, and he becomes president. He wasn't groomed. He didn't have the support base. He came in. And now, and you remember in 2000, one of the first things he did when he was president is to shut down the corruption taking place in Lebanon, the Syrian presence in Lebanon, the absolute colonial exploitation that the Syrian army was doing in Lebanon. He shut it down, brought him back, almost cost him his life. Because the Baathists and the generals, his father's government, Hafez al-Assad's government, was as corrupt as the day is long. They had built fiefdoms. They were, it was all about enriching themselves. It wasn't about helping the people. It was about using fear and intimidation to maintain power. And Bashar al-Assad inherited this. He wanted to resolve this. He tried reforms. He talked about it. He talked about the reforms. Erdogan and he used to be best buddies. He used to fly to Turkey, and Erdogan would advise him on how to work through these processes of reforms and offered support. But then a drought came in 2006, a drought that devastated the countryside. It lasted for several years, devastated the countryside of Syria. And what happened is these people fled the villages, fled the countryside, and came to Damascus, and the corrupt government under Assad wasn't prepared for this, and they failed. And the buck stops where? With Assad. He was blamed for this. It weakened him politically, and he now is trying to resolve this issue, help people, and he's not doing a good job. Support is falling to the point that when the Arab Spring comes, there's the weakness is perceived and people step in. But it happened before that. Danny, you remember who Cohen? Not David Cohen.
Stephen Cohen.
Who?
Stephen Cohen, the Russian historian.
No, the Google, the guy who wrote the book. He's Mr. Digital Democracy. He traveled the Middle East, wrote a book about his experiences there, and he talked about digital democracy and how social media could transform the Middle East. And he went on to be a State Department employee and working for Hillary Clinton and that.
Jared Cohen, are you talking
Jared about? Cohen, there he is, yeah. So Jared Cohen goes into Syria and tries to sell the Syrian government on the need to open up the internet so that there can be freedom of expression and all this. The CIA jumps in on that and says, yeah, thank you. We're going to also come in now using the various non-governmental organizations, and we're going to train people on how to use digital cameras, satellite uplinks to interface with social media to take control of the narrative. They did this during the Arab Spring in Egypt. Take a look at the role that was played there and how that was used to take down the Egyptian government. They tried to do it in Iran during the Green Revolution. You remember Jared Cohen famously or infamously, depending on your point of view, intervened with Twitter. Said you can't take Twitter down for maintenance because Twitter right now is essential for getting the message out about Iran out to the social media network, et cetera, as part of this information warfare that was taking place. This is Jared Cohen. And he created a whole network of these communities, the CIA and others inside Syria, that now as the unrest is happening, after 2011, unrest that was brought about not by popular revolt, but by jihadists who've been prepared. When the villages were repaired, it was done with Saudi money as they started to restore the agriculture sector of Syria. And with the Saudi money came Saudi imams, Wahhabists, Salafists. And they come into the villages and they start creating problems from in the village, from up in. So you get these gangs of Salafists. Study what happened in the early days of this revolt in 2011. It's not a spontaneous revolt by the Syrian people. It's a bunch of guys coming in on motorcycles and with in Jizr al-Shagur, up in towards the Turkish border. Basically, you have these thugs coming in and seizing control and creating a problem. Then the Turks are smuggling in weapons to them. This isn't a spontaneous uprising. This is done by Salafists seeking to radicalize a population. That's what was happening here. Money pouring in. The CIA sets up a system to bring weapons out of Libya, billions of dollars of weapons, and flow them in through Turkey down. The Turkish government bought into this, shifted. Went from being the friend of Bashar al-Assad, saying he's a dictator who slaughters his own people and has to be removed from power. This is what's happening. This isn't about a Syrian civil war. Don't ever call it a Syrian civil war. It wasn't a Syrian civil war. It was a Syrian government fighting off outside forces seeking to carry out regime change in Syria. And this is the reality of Bashar al-Assad. So even though he knows there needs to be reforms and he wants to do the reforms, he can't. How can you reform a nation which is under attack? So he has to fall back on the existing power base. That is the corrupt generals and the corrupt governors. Now it's wartime, so people tend to put aside the corruption and focus on national salvation. And they had a hell of a time. They lost. You saw the map. You've seen the map. As the Syrian government is forced to withdraw from here, ISIS steps in, Idlib falls, and it just shrinks down to this tiny little butt state around Damascus. And then Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian RAGC, and the Iranians were working on helping the Syrians, but they realized they needed decisive intervention that they couldn't provide. He traveled to Moscow and got the Russians to come in at the invitation of Bashar al-Assad. And the Russian Air Force came in and proved to be decisive. The Russian Air Force, together with the Iranian proxies, were able to stop the retreat of the Syrian army, get them back up, and enable a counterattack to take place. Successfully saved the day. But now it's over. 2018 rolls around, and the Russians turn to Bashar al-Assad and say, you gotta reform your military. It's broken. It's corrupt. It won't work. It's not sustainable. But Assad's sitting there going, but these are the guys that saved me. And now you want me to turn to him and say, nah, by the way, you're fired, and all you governors have to go away. We're going to put in a new institution and disenfranchise everything that you've fought to save. But Assad said no. The Iranians came in and said, okay, well, since we know your guys can't fight by themselves, we need to come in and buttress them. We need to bring in Iranian military leaders. You remember back then there was the talk about the Iranians coming in to take over Syrian air defense. They said, we'll come in, we'll give you all this air defense equipment, we'll do this, modernize it so you can protect your skies against Israel. And the Russians said no. Russia said, you can't do that. We agreed with the Israelis that while you could come in and we're going to come in and we don't want Israel to intervene, it's to save Assad, to push back these outside powers, but that you don't get to turn Syria into a permanent, axis of resistance base that threatens Israel. And so the Russians pushed them back. Plus, Assad did too. He's an Alawite leader of a primarily Sunni state. And what do you think happens psychologically to Sunni generals and Sunni governors when a bunch of Shia from Iran come in and start plastering posters of Qasem Soleimani and the Ayatollah Khomeini and Hassan Nasrallah, if you're from Lebanon? It was demoralizing. And so even Bashar al-Assad said, no, we have to reduce the Iranian presence. So refused the Russian reforms, refused the Iranian assistance, didn't do anything to save his military. And what happened is you have conscripts. It doesn't matter how well you dress them up. I mean, these guys had new uniforms, new weapons, everything. What did they believe in? They'd already fought, the Syrian army had already fought for many years to save Syria. but to save Syria that would then reform itself to take care of the Syrian population. But all they get is more sanctions. And those sanctions lead to a greater black market economy that's further exploited by the corrupt beings to empower themselves. And what happens is you have this facade, a literal Potemkin village that everybody who supported Syria bought into. I'd be interested to interview Vanessa Beeley and find out what why she believed what she believed. She lived there. Didn't she see what was going on? I'm fairly certain that the Russian Defense Ministry was receiving reports from the Russian officers about the corruption and how difficult things are. And I'm sure the Russian government was talking to Bashar al-Assad about how you need to do reforms. But why didn't Vanessa and other people see this? As they travel around and all this, why did they believe that Assad was this much loved leader and that the Syrian army was this ferocious machine ready to defend Syria to the death, when all HTS had to do was huff and puff and they blew the house down like that? So Russia to blame for this, Russia colluding, Russia stabbing Syria in the back, not even close. Russia did what Russia does, looks out for Russian interests, and tried to back up Syria as much as they could. But you can't be more Syrian than Syrian. You can't ask Russian soldiers to die for a cause in Syria that the Syrian army isn't willing to die for. And the Syrian army just gave up, went away. Why? Because nobody believed in Bashar al-Assad anymore. And where was Bashar al-Assad? The lion of Damascus. Did you see? You can condemn Zelensky all you want, and I do. Zelensky's gone to the front lines. Zelensky goes and he talks to Ukrainian soldiers. Zelensky gives impassioned speeches. Where was Assad? Where was Assad? When did he go to the front line and gather his generals? When did he put on a camouflage coat and go to the front line and look at a map and start directing the battle? Because he's the president. He didn't do any of that. He was silent. And then he flew away. You can't blame anybody but Bashar al-Assad for what happened in Syria.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, just briefly my assessment, because I want to talk about Israel now and the time that we have. But in my assessments, from what we know, I think a lot of people are wanting to project things that we don't know onto this situation. But what we do know is that the last several years of the Syrian governments under Assad's leadership had been very difficult ones where I've actually been surprised over the last year plus since the Gaza genocide had occurred, how quiet the Syrian government was even around that. And it seems to me that Syria was making at the time over the past couple of years, many moves to try to reintegrate itself back into the fold of the region. And it seems that the combination, and I think a lot of people are underestimating this, I'm glad you brought it up earlier, the impact of the Caesar sanctions. I mean, the devastating conditions that exist in Syria to this day, which are only going to get worse, certainly play a huge role in eroding the strength of a government and the strength of a leader, not to mention all of the various forces you just outlined historically playing out in the present, because we still don't know how much planning even went. I know that there's a surprise element about how successful it was, but there have obviously been plans ongoing to overthrow the Syrian government, even as there have been negotiations to normalize, whether it's with the Arab League, whether it's with Turkey, Russia, and the Astana process. It's obvious that the forces that wanted to overthrow the Syrian government and wanted to continue to weaken it were continuously doing that. And I think we're going to find out in the coming days that Bashar al-Assad, it seems like there's some reports saying it seems like he was just finished, like he just couldn't take that pressure anymore. And over the last several years, I've been curious about this myself. But Scott, I wanted to move on actually.
Let me just can I make one comment on that real quick?
Sure.
Because I agree with you. I think I'm not going to call it a mistake, because again, when you're Bashar al-Assad and you're desperate, you're looking at a country that has gone through a war. He was seeking to become reintegrated into the Arab League, And suddenly we saw all these nations, because remember, who funded Al Qaeda? Who funded Al Nusra? Who funded ISIS? Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates. And suddenly they're all going, hey, buddy, we love you. Come on over to our capital. Here's some cash and all this stuff. I think what we're going to find is, because everybody's going Israel, 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 Israel. I think what you're going to find is Riyadh, 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 Riyadh. That Bashar al-Assad in Syria were betrayed by the Arabs, who, remember, it was Saudi Arabia who created the jihadists to begin with, and who control the jihadists from a religious standpoint. I think you're going to find that the Arab money that was starting to, because Bashar al-Assad avoided, Russian reforms and Iranian presence in exchange for reintegration into the Arab League, and the Arab money that flowed in had a lot of strings attached, not just official strings, but strings that Bashar al-Assad wasn't aware of, such as CIA strings. When you start bringing in that much money into a country that corrupt, this is what the CIA lives for. They find the points of weakness, and believe me, once your priority stops being your nation and becoming rich, the CIA will find that out. MI6 will find that out, and now this Arab money comes in, and I think they paved the way for the dissolution of Assad regime by buying people off. And I think there's a whole bunch of money that went in there, and we'll find that out. I mean, but we'll see. Take a look at the power structures that remain. Take a look at what after Assad went, what should have collapsed and what doesn't collapse, and that'll tell you where the money went and who got bought off and things like that. The only curveball in this is I don't think anybody predicted HTS would win. I think the power structures were designed for a Syrian National Army victory. The SNA should have been the ones marching into Damascus, raising their flag. HTS was never meant to do anything more than Idlib and Aleppo. But because HTS went so damn fast, they didn't. So some of those, for instance, I heard there was a Syrian general that was at his home, and HTS went in there and butchered him. I think he was at his home because he took the money and he was waiting to be the guy that they called upon to rebuild the Syrian military and all this stuff. I think there's a bunch of former Assad people that took the money and thought they were going to be the pillars of what came next, but because HTS came in so fast, they're going to get their heads cut off. So, but I think the fact is Assad trusted the Arab world, and the Arab world betrayed him, as they betrayed everybody. I mean, I'm sure we might talk about Palestine later on, but the Palestinian people have been betrayed by the Arabs yet again, because this collapse of Syria has put the cause of Palestine into a very, very difficult predicament. But now I'm sorry, I just wanted to add that.
No, and I'll just say one final thing. I think, it's hard to speculate for me about Bashar al-Assad's last years of decision making, because there's so much that we do not know. What we do know, though, is that the decision to normalize with the Arab countries that were especially the monarchies that were responsible for much of the suffering that Syria had undergone during the initial phases of the dirty war from 2011 onward, was an understandable concession. I've been hearing reports that could validate some of what you say, Scott, about these countries. Maybe there were concessions with the military. You said that Assad rebuffed Iran and Russia. There's suspicions that Assad may have reworked the military in the vision of what these monarchies, the kind of people that they would want to be commanding. And it makes a lot of sense then that when HTS and these groups were rolling through, a lot of these commanders were not saying, go fight. Let's organize. Let's strategically fight. A lot of them were saying, don't fight. Let's allow this to happen. And it makes me wonder, yes, if that is where the betrayal is. But I wanted to ask you, Scott, because now that we are in this period of complete chaos, we see the executions now in the street being undertaken by these so-called quote unquote rebels HTS being just one of the groups that is now likely to be vying for power in an unstable and destabilized Syria. We see Israel conducting at least 300 strikes. It's destroying basically every single last edifice of military infrastructure in Syria. We see them expanding upwards to 20 to 40 kilometers to the capital itself. I'm curious, Scott, what you make of this military debacle now. You know, a lot of us in the geopolitical space, we've had many shows talking about Israel's difficulties. It seems that this has been a boon for them. How do we square what's going on and what the consequences will be?
Well, again, I don't think, Danny, that we were unsound in our analysis. I mean, Israel was humiliated by Hamas on October 7th. Israel was lured into Gaza to fight a conflict that they weren't able to prevail in the intervening time, and B, succeeded in exposing Israel for the reality of Israel. You know, what happened in Syria doesn't change the fact that Israel is a genocidal state. It's an apartheid state. It doesn't change that. Israel has been exposed for what it is. And Israel then got, Hezbollah did a masterful job of escalation management, of maintaining just enough friction on the northern Israeli front to support the Hamas operation. But the goal and objective was never to create a second front. Because again, if you believe in a Palestinian state, you have to understand that the world's focus has to be on Palestine, on Gaza, on solving that issue, not on solving other issues, on solving that issue. Because that issue is important to the Palestinians. It's not important to the world. I just want to reiterate this one more time so people understand. The world isn't bending over to help the Palestinians, never have. It's just when Sinwar created a geopolitical problem that the world had to focus on, and then Israel gets exposed for what Israel is, a genocidal apartheid state, and now questions of morality come in. What do we do? And the solution is to create a Palestinian state. And we had widespread agreement that that was the solution. The world started talking about this, moving in that direction. And as long as Israel is strategically defeated, that's a sustainable solution. And Israel was losing against Hezbollah through this war of escalation. The Houthi, Ansarallah, came in and strangled Israel, economically. Iran was there managing the whole thing as the coordinator of the axis of resistance, and further humiliated Israel by penetrating their unbeatable Iron Dome. And so that you have this Iranian ability to attack Israel with 1,000 missiles looming over the head of Israel. Israel is the one who sought the ceasefire in Lebanon. Now, Hezbollah had been hurt. Let's not pretend that even though Israel is being strategically defeated, it's incapable of bringing pain. Hassan Nasrallah was killed. So was the senior Hezbollah leadership. And Hezbollah itself took hits, not fatal. Hezbollah recovered. Just ask the Golani Brigade and the 7th Armored Brigade about the hell that they were experiencing in southern Lebanon. But the Lebanese people were also being hit. It's one thing to blow up Gazans. Nobody cares about Gazans. They don't have a government infrastructure over them that can make appeals, etc. Lebanese are different. There's a Lebanese government. They have diplomatic relations around the world, and Israel's blowing them up and killing these Lebanese people. And basically, the Lebanese government turned to Hezbollah and said, "You can't. We can't continue to do this." And Hezbollah isn't just a resistance movement. Hezbollah is part of the Israeli or the Lebanese government. It's a political party, and they no longer have Hassan Nasrallah leading them. The man who was there since 1992, who played such a big role in creating Hezbollah and getting the Hezbollah not only to emerge as this viable resistance movement capable of standing toe-to-toe with Israel, but this political movement that has significant impact on Lebanon's policies. It's part of the Lebanese government. And as part of the Lebanese government, it is beholden to the needs of the Lebanese people. And so Hezbollah agreed that there had to be a ceasefire. that had to happen. Had Hezbollah not agreed to the ceasefire, then they would have broken faith and trust with the people of Lebanon, and the Lebanese government would have turned against them, and that would have put Hezbollah in a very difficult predicament. So they agreed to the ceasefire. But it wasn't until but that ceasefire was being pushed by the Israelis because they were getting their butts kicked by Hezbollah in the south. Their army was exhausted by failing to win in Gaza, failing to win here. They were exhausted, so they needed this ceasefire. And that's literally we got the ceasefire, and then almost the next day, HTS starts moving. I don't believe that there's a connectivity between the two things. I think HTS moved because they were prepared to take over the M4 highway. I think they saw an opportunity. Russia was distracted. Iran was worried about this ceasefire and retrograde, and they made a move. And as we've talked about, it went on. Israel is watching this, and here's the thing: Netanyahu is the ultimate political survivor. He ran 4 elections prior to this most recent one, where he got elected, then he got thrown out, then he got elected again. Each time, people, including myself, would write, "That's the end of Netanyahu. Politically finished. He can't recover from this." Next thing you know, there's an election, and boom, there he is again. You're going, Netanyahu is the ultimate political survivor. And then he collapses. That's the end of Netanyahu. And on this last one, people like myself were saying he's collapsing. He's going into a situation where he's charged with corruption. The court's going to come and get him. It's all over. He can't possibly make it. Goodbye. There's an election. He forms a minority government. He's prime minister. He starts to change the laws to prevent the courts from coming after him. That creates chaos there. Had Sinwar not carried out October 7th, there's a good chance Netanyahu wouldn't be prime minister today, because there was that much opposition to what he was doing to reform the basic laws. But now October 7th comes along. Now, October 7th should have been enough to get rid of him. Any morally conscious leader would have resigned in disgrace. Not Netanyahu. He has no moral conscience. Instead, he says, "I am the savior of Israel. I will save you from Hamas." And then when that failed, he said, "I'm going to create a problem with Hezbollah, and I'm going to save you from that problem." That failed. He creates a problem with Iran. "I'm going to save you." That failed. So by the time the ceasefire comes, I myself am saying that's it. Netanyahu isn't going to survive the year. Now we have a situation where Bashar al-Assad has collapsed. What is the Israeli Air Force doing? Destroying the infrastructure of Syria so that it is removed permanently. No matter who takes over, there will not be a Syrian threat to Israel. Israel has occupied all of the Golan Heights and extended into territory within 20 kilometers of Damascus. Hezbollah is isolated, cut off, can't be resupplied. So Hezbollah has been diminished and probably will have to go through a period of significant restructure that redefines it as a resistance movement and as a political movement. Suddenly, overnight, Netanyahu gets to say, "I've saved Israel." Now, he's taking credit for other people's work, but he's saying, "I saved Israel." He gets to create a narrative, because to the victor gives the right to create a narrative. He says, because of the damage I did to Hezbollah, because of the damage I did to Iran, this opportunity was created. I saved Israel. And politically, he has saved Israel. He gets to take that credit. He's taking down, Syria. The government takes it. I know there's a couple of videos that show people, we're going to march on to Damascus. They're not going to get anywhere close to Jerusalem or anything else. And Jolani and company aren't going to do that anyways. Their focus is Baghdad. I'm telling you right now, Jolani ain't going to Jerusalem. Jolani's going to Baghdad. That's what I think. So Israel won. And now here's the thing. An Israeli victory with a Biden presidency or a Kamala Harris presidency still would have been a problem, because Israel still is a genocidal, maniacal state that has committed horrific war crimes. There's a ICC warrant out for him, an ICJ warrant, condemnation. But Donald Trump won. And Trump is creating, the Zionist 2.0 in Washington, D.C. Netanyahu, Trump is a businessman. Trump likes strong people. Netanyahu is weak. That's why Trump has treated him like crap, excuse my language, earlier. But now, Bibi's strong. He's going to be Trump's best friend. The United States is going to come in, full support for Israel. I thought that Trump would be overseeing Israel on hospice care, that Israel was strategically defeated. I said nobody will invest in this. Trump's going to come in, and again, let's go back to what we talked about. Who betrayed Assad? The Arabs did. The Arabs betrayed Assad. And the people are going to sacrifice. I love somebody behind me with a sword. No, I'm an analyst, guys. This is what analysts do. No one's threatening me. You come up with, but don't talk about your fantasies. Don't talk about your fictional fantasies. Tell me that I'm wrong. You can't. You can't tell me that Israel's stronger today. You may not want Israel to be stronger today, but you can't deny the fact that Israel has flipped the script. Who's going to stand up for Palestine right now? Tell me one nation is going to stand up for Palestine. We know it's not going to be Turkey. So who else is out there? It's not going to be the United States. So the Palestinian cause has suffered a grievous injury, perhaps fatal. Israel, in order for Palestine to exist, Israel has to be strategically defeated. Israel's not strategically defeated. So watch what happens next under Trump. Cleansing of the West Bank. Gaza will be depopulated. This is what's going to happen because nobody's going to stand up against it. So it's the end of Palestine, the end of Palestinian aspirations. The United States is going to prop up Israel, and watch what the Arabs do. They do it every single time. They betray themselves. Saudi Arabia will normalize relations with Israel, even after saying they will never do it until there's a free Palestinian state with its capital in Jerusalem. Saudi Arabia will flip like this. Normalize. That India, Middle East, European economic corridor that I said was dead, it ain't dead. It's back. It's back because all the parties necessary to make it happen are aligned. This is changed everything, and there will be now a greater Israel. It won't be it's not going to go to the Euphrates River, but it's expanded out of Golan towards Damascus. They're going to take Gaza. They're going to take the West Bank. They may end up taking parts of southern Lebanon to secure. So how am I wrong? Do I want this to happen? No, not at all. I was sort of pleasantly pleased with the idea of Israel on life support and getting the extra morphine shot and dying and a Palestinian state emerging in its place. That's what I thought would have been a fair and just outcome. But an analyst isn't here to tell you what he wants to happen. It's here to tell you what is happening. And what is happening is everything I just said. Whether you like it or not, that's it. And now the question is, I see people, Iran's not defeated. Well, they're not strategically defeated. They exist. But their position certainly isn't very strong right now. And now we have to ask the question inside Iran, what is going on inside Iran? You have a president who was elected on a platform that included reaching out to the West. Now, there's a whole bunch of people out there who are anti this. They supported Raisi and all this. I don't care what you believe, guys. Tell me I'm wrong. Is there an Iranian president today who wants to improve relations with the West? Is there an Iranian president today who is reaching out to the United States to talk about Iran's nuclear program? That means he wants to revive the JCPOA, which means Iran will reverse many of the things they've been doing on their nuclear program. Tell me I'm wrong. You can't. You can tell me you're against it. You can tell me you oppose it. You can tell me whatever you believe about it. That's what's happening. And now we have a president, Trump, who comes in on January 20th, who ran for election saying he's not seeking the demise of the Islamic Republic. What he is seeking to do is lift sanctions if Iran is willing to work with him on the nuclear program. Suddenly we have a confluence going on there. Changes everything. We are talking about a shifting thing. And the only constant here is that Arabs will continue to betray Arabs. Arabs betrayed Bashar al-Assad. They're going to betray the Palestinian cause. And then they're going to betray themselves by supporting Israel. And who knows? This is a very complex situation. We haven't even talked about BRICS, and we don't have time to talk about BRICS, but what does it mean for BRICS when Iran suddenly starts reaching out to the West at a time it's supposed to be joining an economic forum dealing with the global South. But again, if there's anybody out there who says, no, I predicted the fall of Bashar al-Assad and everything that's happening today, I'll ask for your proof, and otherwise I'll just call you a liar.
Yeah. Well, it certainly is a difficult moment in the world. The Palestinian cause, yes, it is certainly looking bleak at the moment. It is difficult to say death, though, given the fact that it is dead in terms of when it will happen. Certainly, this is a huge setback. I think one thing to note, though, is that there's a lot of uncertainty even just over the situation. What is certain now is that the Syrian government has fell and that Israel is making these huge, just absolutely, I mean, internationally condemned expansionist moves. And of course, this has been a big win for Israel, Turkey, and it is still up for debate whether it will be a big win for the United States now that the U.S. kind of has to fight Turkey for control in Syria. But there's obviously some U.S. strategic.
But again, Donnie baby wants out of Syria. There will be no Turkish-American clash over. America will dump the Kurds as we've always dumped the Kurds. There will be no clash between Turkey. Trump likes strong leaders. Erdogan has just emerged as a strong leader. So Trump isn't going to, this isn't Biden-Harris, this is Trump. So it's a whole new different dynamic. Turkey, Israel there will be no international condemnation for anything Israel's doing today in Syria. None whatsoever. So they're not internationally condemned anymore. Watch how quick. And again, with the Palestinians, the only thing that gave the Palestinians hope was retained presence in West Bank and Gaza. But if Israel now doubles down and forcefully, because with Trump there will be zero pushback. There, and Europe is collapsing. They desperately need American assistance to survive. So that's the end. Watch how quick Spain. Let's put a bet on this. I bet you by the end of the year, Spain's reversed its recognition of a Palestinian state, because Europe is going to be in free fall. Trump's going to say any country that supports the Palestinian state will get 120% tariffs. And Spain will go, what Palestinian state? Don't understand what you're talking about. Watch how quickly the ICC folds or disappears. This is a whole new world with Trump coming in. And the only chance Palestine had is the death of Israel. And Israel, I believe, was on life support. Not anymore. This is a horrible situation. It's not good, but it's real. And you have to recognize the reality. You can't solve a problem unless you properly define the problem. So it's imperative that before we jump to solutions, that we talk about the reality of what has happened here.
Yeah, indeed. The reality is certainly a major setback. I didn't even get to ask you about how you mentioned a little bit about how Iran might respond to this. But indeed, there are huge warning signs for Iran. And I think you're 100% right that these groups, HTS in particular, will be moving to Iraq. And I think that is, of course, a huge problem for Iran, because in my estimation, the whole plan, the whole agenda here is a march toward Iran to destabilize Iran. That was the plan from the beginning.
Yep. The only chance Iran has right now to prevent that, because again, Russia will not go to war for Iran. It isn't going to happen. Russia will help Iran, but Russia's not going to go to war for Iran. Iran's best friend right now, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hate on this, is the United States. The only chance Iran has to exist is to bend the knee to America on its nuclear program and sort of become a well-behaved player in the American playground. America just became, I mean, this is blowing my mind. We were watching the strategic withdrawal of America from the Middle East.
Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am back with another new video. In this video is called Ritter. I have discussed about
उधर देख।
Middle East. So if you like to watch video like this,
Help!
then you can subscribe my channel. Because in my channel I daily upload unlimited videos. So I am requesting you to watch my video until the end.
Help!
So guys, keep watching my channel and then you can So guys, if you like to watch this video like this, then you can subscribe and watch each and every of my videos. Guys, if you like to watch video like this without related to current or global relations, then you can subscribe my channel.
Watch out! Help! Help!
Guys, if you like to watch video like this, then you can subscribe my channel. Guys, Scott retired as ex-army officer of US military, so he has vast knowledge of current warfare. Now I am playing a game whose name is GTA. So guys, if you are like also busy in my gameplay, then also you can like my channel, because this is the game like battleground like war. So guys, thank you for watching until the watching. Special thanks to them who are still watching my channel. I am very grateful to them who are still watching my channel. Guys, this is I have already downloaded many videos in my channel, so you can subscribe my channel and watch each and every video. I'm now coming behind the number 2 teammate. Let's see what's happening in it.
I got supplies.
Thank you for watching until then. Now I am going to end this video from here. I'll do back with another video next time. Bye for now.